Now on Overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
David-Llewellyn-Smith from MacroBusiness with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
Yes, indeed. Good morning. It is Thursday morning, and time for us to have a look at what's in the Treasury of Common Sense with MacroBusiness founding editor and publisher David-Llewellyn-Smith. Morning, David.
Good morning.
I'm a bit worried about the Treasury of Common Sense. Is there much left in that Treasury these days?
It's been draining away for 20-odd years now.
Yes.
So it's certainly depleted, yes.
Okay. Well, let's have a look at some of the issues that seem to be on people's minds and in discussion. The tax cuts, why they should be changed, and conversely, why they shouldn't be. Let me start off with the affirmative. Do you have an argument as to why they should be changed?
Basically, they should be changed if you want to make them fairer.
Yeah.
And if circumstances were different, you would generally be cutting taxes in the hope that it would boost your growth. On this occasion, you don't really want that.
Because at this point, somebody will say, inflationary.
Precisely right. So on the downside, you've got that if you restructure the taxes so that more of them go to middle and lower incomes, more of it will be spent. And as a result, you'll get more inflation. So that's the negative. And on the positive, it's always good to see tax cuts, especially when the tax take is so high.
Yes.
It's the highest it's been since the mid-90s, I think. And so, it's right and proper that we see tax cuts. The package itself was progressively rolled out and some thought went into it, and there was relief for lower income households. So you can make the argument that, it is actually a positive and should go ahead as it was. And then, of course, you've got the political implications, which would suggest that it would be politically more sensible to just proceed as is, because the government's going to be labelled a liar.
Yes. Well, they are, aren't they?
They are. Indeed, They are. They committed to the stage 3 and they've backflipped. Albanese has spent the better part of 2.5 years explaining why he wouldn't do it.
And digging the hole even deeper for himself, I would suggest. Let me put this to you. I don't know if you think this is a bit off to the side, but those stupid ads we have on TV after the gambling ads that say, think about what you could be spending the money on, you might win, but you might lose, all that kind of thing. My theory is if you've got no hope of buying something substantial like a house, the chances are you're going to do the YOLO thing, aren't you? You only live once. Hey, better for a bit of excitement, quick fix, bit of a gamble. No point saving up anyway. If people were encouraged to work harder and it was aspirational, which was the aim of the taxes originally, I presume, if you work harder and make more and have a better standard of living and buy a house instead of betting it on the Keno or whatever. Yeah,
I think that's a fair argument as well.
Yeah.
It's an ideological battle now as we head towards the next election, between, on the one hand, those that would like to see workers better off in the short term, and those that think that you should be rewarded for merit and not be punished for it. And so I suspect the changes will aid the coalition, basically.
But of course, what we will see, and it is going to be a class war, no question, we will see the Albanese government and their mentors out there and promoting the idea that Mr. Dutton is all for do we still say silver tails, all for the people up the top of the pyramid?
I think so. It will be really interesting to see how it plays in the teal seats, where the coalition lost a lot of its traditionally blue ribbon seats.
Well, we've already had one teal saying they won't support it, haven't we?
You have, but there are others who are saying they will.
Yeah.
And who actually argued the case before changing it. And so, I mean, the tax cut for people on sort of 180 to 200,000 has been halved. It's a substantial cut. So, with the coalition committing to rolling back the changes, and the Teals potentially being tarred by supporting it through the Senate, there is a plausible scenario in which the coalition can recapture some of those seats, which are, very traditionally blue ribbon.
What about this one? Fearless prediction here. Will the RBA be cutting rates in the second half of this year? And if so, why?
I think they will, yes. And I think they're going to surprise with the timing and depth of cuts. I think it'll be more aggressive than most people expect. We've been in recession for per capita recession for, essentially for 18 months, almost the entire period of the Albanese government.
Yep.
That's a circumstance in which, you've got insufficient activity, and so you've got a lot of disinflation in the economy. And so we started off with, very high inflation, but it's coming down a lot. It's coming down quite fast, and there are reasons to expect it to continue. The latest data from December and even early January is pretty dour for the economy, with a lot of price falls on survey data in business and consumer stuff. So, the sense is that the reduction in inflation is well on track. And then you have, some mounting headwinds as well, looking into the second half of the year. China is being convulsed by all sorts of difficulties. An extraordinary bear market in just about every asset class. That has taken hold of some of our commodities, and it looks like it will advance and probably grab them all in due course. So we'll see lower national income. The other major factor is immigration is really swamping the labour market. And even though we've got a lot of job ads still, we've got an extraordinary number of job applicants now. And so wages are going to come off pretty quick, and that's the end of services inflation. And then the third thing is energy prices everywhere are collapsing worldwide. Not quite so quickly here for various reasons, but they have come down a very long way from 2 years ago, and you've got Albanese government doing a lot of subsidies on that front as well as on rents, and so I think inflation is going to disappear relatively fast from here, and the talk will turn very quickly towards when the RBA should be looking to cut so that they don't overdo the weakness.
Yes, indeed. You talk about, and Mr. Albanese and his government certainly do, talk about the way that they've helped the people, the weak-to-weak type people with various subsidies and cuts here and, helping out there. But, I mean, really what has to be addressed is the economy overall, surely. And with China, I don't know, once again, this is slightly off the track, but you've got a president there who, it seems from coverage here, is worried about whether or not Taiwan's part of China. What's happening in his own enormous country, that should occupy anybody full time, should it not, with all he's got to deal with?
Exactly right. I mean, he's your classic dictator.
Yep.
Living in a bubble.
Yep.
He's disappeared so many people that nobody wants to give him the bad news anymore. So he's living with rose-coloured glasses, and so the rest the China's economy really is in all sorts, with a property crash, a share market crash, very weak growth, endemic deflation, which makes its debt really hard to pay, and it looks a bit like the early stages of what the US went through in 2008, 2009. Now, I don't think its banks are going to go under the way the US ones did, but it's a very difficult circumstance to navigate. And if you are, drunk on your own Kool-Aid from all your attendance, then you're not in a good position to manage it. And so he certainly should be looking inwards, not out.
Indeed. You talk about the US. It used to appear to me back in the day, the US was like the rainforest. You know, some parts of the rainforest are flourishing and other parts are decaying, but overall the rainforest is hanging in. And that, to my mind, used to be how the US is. But I don't think you'd see that kind of difference in flexibility in China, would you?
You do, but
Yeah.
it's more extreme. Like, I think what you're talking about in the case of the US is flexibility.
Yes.
You know, because it's all driven by the private sector and swift assessments in markets and efficient allocation of capital. So you get to see the kind of movements you're describing are very quick, and one thing can offset another. Whereas in China, you get these enormous overshoots in one part and these enormous undershoots in another, because they're slow-moving bureaucratic decisions that tend to push things too far in one direction or the other. So it's not that you don't see those counterbalances, but they're much more extreme and much less efficient. And so ultimately, you know, that means you end up probably with, a lot more debt, a lot less productivity, and, you know, ultimately an economy that stagnates and kind of, you know, ends up something like Japan rather than the US.
So ultimately, what is that going to mean for us in the next 6 to 12 months?
Look, it's really hard to say, because they're fighting. They're fighting it in some ways, and so the timing of things. I'd rather talk about 5 years, and you know, if you talk about 5 years, you really are talking about what happened to Japan after 1989, which is, you know, you saw a booming emerging market economy that everyone said would take over the world, that basically then crashed and more or less disappeared. And geopolitical forces and power and influence went with it. So I think you're going to see a similar thing with China, you know, over the next 5 to 10 years. It's not going to rebound. It never will. It's in a debt deflation. Its debt load will be very difficult to manage. Property is done there. It's been a once in a century boom to build out a modern nation from what was very backward. And so that whole construction component that has driven Australian commodities and engagement is finished. It's not crashing, but it's not going to grow at all from here, and it will diminish. So, you know, I mean, basically, I see Australia as forsaken by China from here.
Okay.
And you know, I think China withdraws from the world. I mean, at the moment, the world is booting China out of itself. Like, capital is fleeing China at a phenomenal pace for these reasons of troubled growth, but also because it backed Russia in the Ukraine and looks like it might do something similar in Taiwan. So everyone wants to de-risk. And so all that capital is coming out of China, and it's accelerating and pressuring all these problems all the more. And so, you know, you're going to see China really struggle from here. And so that trajectory of China ruling the world is done with.
Very interesting.
You know?
David, appreciate your time and comments. Thank you for that.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
David-Llewellyn-Smith, talking about the Treasury of Common Sense.
We live